Merry Christmas, old bean.
Why, thank you. What is it?
It's a veganza.
But I've already got one of these.
Yeah, and now you have an extravaganza. In fact, it's a podcaster's guide to the conspiracy 200th episode extravaganza. That's some good punning.
Better life through punning.
The podcaster's guide to the conspiracy, brought to you today by Josh Addison and Dr. M. Dentith. Season's greetings and welcome to the podcaster's guide to the conspiracy.
Hello!
As is appropriate for the season, I am Josh Addison, and sitting next to me, appropriately enough, it's Dr. M. Dentith.
Inappropriate enough, really. Because it's a 200th episode, I thought a bottle of beer to move away from the constant whiskey drinking, which is, of course, my bon mot, or as the French would say, my reason to live.
Yes.
That's not what bon mot means.
That's not what bon mot means at all.
Frankly, who cares?
No, the French and yes, so 200 episodes, eh? That's like twice 100.
Is it? I mean, are you sure about your math about that?
That is literal mathematics right there.
I don't know. I think we need an expert. What we need is the help of our new intern. Sorry, beer was escaping there. Our new intern,
yes.
Sam, who has joined us for the special episode to provide us with all the material we need. So, Sam, this episode is going out to you.
Scripted entirely by this mysterious person who I haven't met, but assures me exists.
Well, nor have I. I mean, I've had
right.
email contact. It was a Gmail address. I got some information through. I mean, they seem legit. They did the work. And they did the work for no pay, as befits the intern tradition.
Yes, as I understand it, all you needed to supply was basically the content of most of our previous episodes. And they
needed to have some background, yeah.
And they appear to have got the gist.
On this beer, and I don't know whether it's because you're distracting me as I'm trying to pour it, or whether I'm just a really bad pour.
Maybe it's just heady beer.
It's true. Oh, and people who are watching the episode will be aware there's a book in frame.
Oh, yes.
This is Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them, edited by Joe Usinski. I'm going to say fan of the show, actually friend of the show, maybe also fan of the show as well.
I'd like to think so.
Of which I am a contributor to, and maybe we'll have a discussion about this large text in a future episode, because it's got at least 40 chapters, 40 different contributors. It's going to take me a while to get through it.
This being the book that you discussed in your interview with Joe.
Indeed it was. Callback.
Yes.
Aren't we professional?
So, I guess we might as well get straight into it. We haven't had to do any preparation since good old interns supplied the entire script for us.
Intern Sam.
So let's see what they've come up with.
Let's.
You utter lush. Would you like to begin?
Indeed. So the topic of today's episode is, could the FBI have perverted justice to get at page societies? Now, first question, have you heard of a page society before?
No.
No, nor have I. So this is quite interesting. This is material that we're going to need some good summing up. So how should we approach this?
I think just read it out verbatim.
Yeah,
I trust the wording supplied to us. So, the Cubans had to tell their diplomatic staff in the UN to not look pleased.
Now, that's interesting. We've had Cuban conspiracy theories before, and also conspiracy theories about the Cuban embassy in Havana, and of course that conspiracy theory about the American embassy in China, and the notion that maybe the Cubans were behind an ultrasonic weapon. So interesting. So this is suggesting that whatever this page society thing is, the Cubans have a hand in it, and they know what they're up to.
Okay, so there are a few points in support of this. JFK was after Alan Dulles, was then supposedly he and no chemical attacks were given in bed. How do we know it was a false flag? My Soviet space dog story of the truth. The ban on the Polybius government.
Now, of course, the Soviet space dog story is, of course, my story about seeing those Soviet space dogs in the Museum of Jurassic Technology. So obviously there's some notion here of false flag and hoaxing, as is pointed out here. But the ban on the Polybius government, I mean, we've talked about the Polybius arcade machine and the various kind of Manchurian candidate conspiracy theories about what happened or didn't happen with this probably fictional Polybius arcade machine, but a Polybius government that's new.
Suggesting an entire administration made up of these sort of mind-wiped Manchurian candidate types.
Or an entire administration made up of arcade cabinet machines.
Well, perhaps we better read on. Do you want to take the next bit?
The Australian Transport Safety Bureau say that the story of the Polybius arcade cabinet and the strange occurrences around it when granting the warrant was discovered when he was going to be televised, and they don't like mortgages and loans. Now, he was going to be televised and they don't like mortgages and loans. Who can that be referring to?
Sounds like some sort of Jewish banking conspiracy theory, although of course the bankers would be in favour of mortgages and loans, so maybe it's the anti-Semitic...
Although, alright, but hold on, we're talking about mortgages and loans, we're talking about someone who's engaging in transactions, and we're probably talking about someone who's involved in legalistic transactions. The most prominent person who's been involved in this kind of stuff in the last week is Michael Cohen. I think they're referring to Michael Cohen. Discovered when Michael Cohen was going to be televised, and they, presumably he and the Trump campaign, don't like mortgages and loans. Is this a hint that there's some kind of financial controversy? Indeed, that was what came out of the investigation this week, was the money being paid by Cohen to Stormy Daniels, and that was kind of being hidden under a different ledger. I think this is about Donald Trump.
Well, it's interesting because I noticed it then gets brought closer to home in the next segment, which reads, there's a considerable conspiracy theory community here in Aotearoa and the Russian secret services. We have said that the plot to engender a one-world government is by getting a small alleged screenshot.
A small alleged screenshot of what?
Well, let's read on. If captured, they were to claim to have been recruited in the back by Lee Basham after Dulles, after the new Europe...
Sorry, did you just say Lee Basham?
Yes.
Friend of the show, Lee Basham is implicated.
Yes, someone's been recruiting him in the back. Or he's been recruiting people in the back.
Right, go on.
After Dulles, after the New Europe and French writer and diplomat Roger Peyrefitte, after he gave a homily condemning homosexuality.
Interesting. Although I must admit I'm losing the thread slightly here, but maybe this will get us back on track. Interesting cultural Marxism is to make Russia. They have plans to pay back to the flamenco.
Could the FBI have perverted justice to get at Page?
So we've got Page. Are they talking about Carter Page? Is there some kind of society around Carter Page?
I'm a little bit lost, I confess.
I mean, the FBI have been investigating Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen and the like. But they're suggesting there was a kind of perversion of justice to get at Page. Is this a pro-Trump conspiracy theory now?
Isn't everything these days?
I'm really losing track most of the time, most of the day.
Shall we continue?
Yeah, so maybe the council story is there would be a false flag event designed to bolster the power of the Nazis in the German parliament. Okay, so we've now moved away from any intimation that might be America. Are we talking historically the Nazis in the German parliament, or are we talking about the current Bundestag?
Well, it does say the night of Kim Jong-nam as the next section. So that appears to be more recent events.
I think that's the title of the next section.
So
I think we're moving from whatever these Page societies are, which may or may not be linked to historical Nazis or current Nazis, or maybe both, to now trying to link this up with North... Which actually that must be a Trump conspiracy theory because of the whole North Korea reconciliation thing.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Yes. So... As to the night of King Jong-nam, He was accused of being gay by French writer and diplomat Roger Perfit. He was going to be killed while people were more willing to pay for the hack. This shows he's still trying to run some kind of dirty tricks in airports, but it's not a strong analogy. We know about that the reports of the court associated cases of children with ASD and children with ASD will make a significant part of the population way.
Population way? What do you mean by population way?
Like the like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, just way the population, like
Is the Keanu Reeves thing?
I assume.
So,
dirty tricks in airports.
The French writer thing that links us back to the previous section.
Yes.
And also apparently Lee Basham. This is very... Lee, if you know what's going on, you do need to get in contact.
I mean, we've got people being recruited in the back, someone condemning homosexuality, and then dirty tricks in airports. There seems to be a bit of a homophobic sort of...
Well, the dirty tricks in airports thing does actually fit in with the death of Kim Jong-nam's...
Oh, that's true, yeah. Well, I noticed then it carries on the massive homes, which surely is talking about famous 70s porn star John Holmes and his massive equipment.
And that says, the problem with the memo, where is Hoomer? Follow Hoomer.
This had nothing to do with Russia yet.
Yeah, that's... Do you believe HRC, Soros... Now, this is a bit weird. Not Obama, Obama, etc. have more power than Trump?
No, is the short answer to that question.
Is it a rhetorical question or a serious question?
I assume. Maybe things will clear up if we read a bit further. I believe that conspiracy theory in order to judge particular instances of up, rather than the war, where the American Vatican Bank set on the earth.
Now, by up, do they mean the Pixar film?
I assume.
Or how many instances of up? I mean, was there a director's cut of up?
No, I think there was just the one.
This suggests there's more.
To do with the American Vatican Bank. Not just the Vatican Bank, but the American Vatican Bank.
I mean, maybe they've got... I mean, like...
Catholic infiltration of America? Is this a JFK thing?
I was just thinking more in the same way that sometimes you find your bank in a different country because they've licensed out an ATM. I mean, maybe there's a Vatican Bank ATM somewhere
Hang on, I think this clears it all up if we read on.
Okay.
So, a large Russian journalist and everything, he was still secretly for Catholic, talked in the thing which they aren't allowed to be Freemasons.
Well, historically, Catholics have not been allowed to be Freemasons.
So frowned upon.
But who's our
so
large
definitely
Russian
seems to be going
journalist?
into secret Catholics. I don't know.
Was it Dolph Lundgren?
What's his face, Babchenko? The one who faked his own death? He was
well, yes.
A bit of a big man for a while.
Even though he wasn't living in Russia, he is a former Russian journalist. I didn't know he was secretly Catholic. That's interesting.
But now, carrying on, the thing is Yuri Gagarin was only around the way to the death. He later had to escape from the president of arrest, but Monsanto agreed to cooperate with their security services. So Gagarin, he wasn't really known as a journalist, but he's certainly a Russian person with a big presence.
Yeah, and famous for orbiting the Earth, but only around the way to the death.
And then Monsanto comes in there, cooperating with someone's security service?
We have to assume it's Russia.
I must be, yeah. But now, the Ukrainian was supposed to buy a new venture called To the Stars Academy of Sciences.
Now, Stars Academy, or the Academy of the Stars...
To the Stars Academy of the Sciences was the UFO thing, big up
run by
Tom DeLonge.
Although I think the name is slightly wrong there, which either indicates it's the same thing, but Sam's got it wrong, or we're dealing with a slightly different venture, or a hidden venture of some kind.
Wheels turning within wheels. But all of you think these are wild conspiracy theories seriously. As a topic of the intelligence who supposedly he was their activities, never, and some notes from the president of the government. The president of the government.
The government.
This goes all the way to the top and then beyond.
Which top?
The top of the government.
Which government?
The president. The government. The one world government.
The New World Order. And then we get background. Ancient Greece and various social scientists and every conspiracy theory say that the process to science, which includes some historians claiming that international were the most of the book, here's a great pyramid of racism back.
A great pyramid of racism, so we're back to Trump again.
But what's this about ancient Greece? I mean, normally America's compared to the fall of Rome and the Roman Republic, as opposed to the ancient Greek nation state. So this is
some sort of Illuminati-style conspiracy stretching all the way back to antiquity.
Is this somehow trying to intimate that the new Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which talks about the establishment of arguably one of the first assassins and the establishment of the organization known as Abstergo or the Templars, is in fact some kind of template explaining what's currently happening in the world?
Well, it could be, because it does say, as a way to last year, he reveals the fear how the clown government have been too. In one that they had been stabbed in the back, and the Chinese government have hired a discrepancy paper to talk of the anti-Semitic undercurrent. But, and psychologists are the contributors to this volume, 2016, as we argued in the records, for all that being Jewish.
All right, so I've got several questions about this paragraph. The first is, which volume 2016?
The volume of 2016.
Was a book about 2016?
Maybe 2016 itself was a fairly
It's not
voluminous.
No, that's
year.
what I call music volume 37.
You could be onto something there, yeah. But the clown government, is that another Trump reference? I'm getting a little bit sick of this thing banging on about Trump.
Well, it kind of sounds
But then there is
like
the Chinese government, anti-Semitic undercurrents and being Jewish. Well,
I mean, the Chinese government
Soros
has
again.
kind of stabbed America in the back due to America setting off tariffs and a war which China's winning with regard to trade. The anti-Semitic undercurrent thing, that's... I mean, there's been quite a lot of that with the rise of the alt-right and various organizations in the US. So that kind of makes sense. But the psychologist being involved, this sounds more like a Scientologist thing.
it does. It is heading towards that, isn't it? Okay, hang on. It looks like we're wrapping up here. Maybe this will tie it all together. Plot to think the CIA do an anti-Catholic conspiracies. In the States had mentioned he knows this and the podcast, or legend that was a gender identity, or by which he was the intelligence of one of a UDHR, which can be aware of his chest pains, wanted to the criminal Western. But Israel out the Illuminati, but they've not known for being Mueller. All they are may never be investigated by the law, and the FBI have 3 directives.
Okay, so the podcast. Is that us?
Is it this podcast? Are we part of this?
Plot to think the CIA do anti-Catholic conspiracies in the States had mentioned he knows this and the podcast. Or legend that was a gender identity. I mean, there's been no other reference to podcasts, and I'm fairly sure Sam would just mention podcasts without making some reference to another podcast unless he's referring to us. So, in that respect, yes, I think that is.
Israel out the Illuminati, they're not known for being Mueller. Well, they're not. Neither Israel nor the Illuminati have anything to do with, or Mueller, as the Americans seem to like to call him, despite having a movie called Ferris Bueller, which is it Bueller or Buller or Mueller or Muller? Make up your mind, Americans.
Yeah, make up your mind and send their postcards to the Podcasters Guide to the
But the FBI have 3 directives. Are those directives serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law?
Well,
because that's RoboCop.
Yeah.
Is the FBI RoboCop?
Well, I mean, A, that should be the directives of the FBI, and B, yes, the FBI is in fact RoboCop.
But then we have to remember that RoboCop actually had the 4th hidden directive, where he wasn't allowed to take action against OCP employees. So are they implying that the FBI actually has secret hidden rules?
Are they implying the FBI is OCP? Now, I would like to point out as a footnote, OCP and RoboCop get mentioned in one of the first philosophical papers on conspiracy theory. Charles Pigden mentions that plot point in RoboCop in Poppy Revisited, or What's Wrong with Conspiracy Theories. He's an erudite man.
I didn't know that, and I'm glad I do now.
Good.
Well...
Actually, let me read the next one. Conspiracy theories come from the fact that there were no chemical attacks.
Are we in Syria now?
But also, I think all conspiracy theories come from the fact there were no chemical attacks, or...
Yeah, I mean, there certainly seems to be some amount of false flaggish 9/11 trutherism analogies going on there.
Yeah.
But I see, as the last entry in this thing, Sam sums everything up simply as a shitload more biblical. So there we have it. The conspiracy manifesto, perhaps, generated by. And you sure this person exists? This was a human being you corresponded with who
I'm beginning to wonder.
that?
Let's see if we can try and sum up what we've learned. So we're talking about page societies, which is fairly clearly a reference to Carter Page. And there's a whole bunch about Russia and the Ukraine, which
And the FBI.
Carter Page and Paul Manafort were involved in. There's a suggestion that the FBI investigation of these individuals is inauthentic due to the Polybius government doing its business.
George Soros and anti-Semitic undercurrents were in there.
And that
Then
makes
isn't that
sense.
always the way?
Yeah. We've got a whole bunch about French writers.
And Catholicism.
And of course, historically, Catholicism has been associated with the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. Although, I mean, actually, there's a lot of prominent Republican Catholics. When you think of JFK and the like, you think of Catholic family dynasties. And then a whole bunch about Russia, which would fit in with the Trump stuff. And the clown government. Really, the only question I've got now is this volume of 2016. I'd like to know more about that.
Maybe there are 2016 volumes in the secret protocols of the shadowy clown government. And we need to look to the last one. I think what I'm getting from this is that the Trump government and Russia have colluded with the Catholics to call the Chinese people homosexuals, and then collude with the Catholics and the reverse vampires that Kim Jong-nam is a Russian space dog, and it's all in the Bible. P.S. Robocop.
Everything's in the Bible. Well, I have to say, for a 200th episode, the revelations we provided you with here are
quite frankly staggering.
Yeah, astounding. World-changing, actually. I actually don't know how the podcast will be able to go on given what we've discovered.
Well, I mean, immediately how it will go on is to the news section, which I understand our intern also had a hand in.
Yep, fresh news facts by Sam, delivered straight to you from our devices. Shall we get into it?
I don't see that we have a choice.
Good.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
And now, the theme.
The election results were somewhat surprising, given that polling had indicated the race for the other partisan likely, Pence, like a various more intelligence book by the New Zealand police force, as some are claiming. It was also more guilty of the stories of being culpable of becoming minister in the past, so why not pledge a few bucks a month for next week?
Yes, outgoing chair of the Police Federation, Steve, of course. The usual unnamed intelligence made over news about the government is a large simplification of a bad theory.
Yes, a minor story, but also about Kavanaugh, about being famously not happy about the previous intelligence services.
Yes, it seems that maybe the Liberal conspiracy to silence Jones might be a story still we are to go back to.
Tell us about the leak.
Ooh, Glenn Beck is one thing that to make of a perpetrator footage for the Gatwick non-leader Semitism.
Well, the thing was, because people assumed there is an interesting investigation into the Russians' Kavanaugh into the US Supreme Court should come up with some present for Trump.
Yes, upon gaining access to the files, he simply got one and claims the article in that recent book.
We start this week's news segment with a piece which needs some introduction. Philip, second rate of the Mandela, including anti, which you do after the Hungarian.
And now, Alex Jones. Maestro, he has recently had a book.
All hail! Oh, it doesn't. Indeed, my last co-host, but I've said too much. In news close to other news, it way, because they are sure who is nothing only to note that the former government priorities.
Thank you, Em. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. We turn to James's People correspondent.
This week we introduced an excuse to think that the hoaxers were meant to have said that it was enforced on the API of limited use. But it's an interesting case of knowing what counts as evidence and what doesn't.
Well, that sounds dubious.
Well, let's travel back in time where at the moment it seems to have got a bit of a comeback.
Yes, it seems that maybe the Liberal conspiracy to silence Jones might be a story. Before we would be mentioning we're sceptical despite our recent books, and here's an article on what it is to be a hero to go on.
And now, Nibiru. Apparently, we're all going to die.
Except that they are not. That is, African Americans are not white attendees of the show. Apparently it's hot on the hunt, and this isn't news so much as it is olds.
Now, this is conspiratorial enough as it stands.
Yes, Johnson believes that the FBI and the CIA have it in for Republican presidents, this being despite the fact that an awful lot of the attacks being culpable of culture in the election. Conspiracism!
And now, a quick message. Prime Minister of the more exciting news.
It turns out that Mr. Odinga will not be contesting that election in order to give the Electoral Commission enough time to introduce reforms that would help deliver something more credible or named.
Lots of news, see? We are not. Go as you are.
A story before you get a little bit real. But it is in our response to the Russian media today. I believe you just came back for and back of what a court Schumer, and I just don't seem to be a priest to baptize anyone.
Well, the thing was, because the question is whether many of the Valley time we would want more an extra 11, especially since he says they claim it has been on topic.
Which is not to say that Kavanaugh is a bit of a cultural Cold War going on in the Pacific with the facts in order to make people become uncertain of the truth.
Let me flush a conspiratorial.
And now, the theme.
Officially, you would say he is to be someone by a deep state plot to stop Russian media interests, when it turns out that the time between an event and someone saying a false flag, this week.
And now some local news. Relates and the investigation.
Well, not really. We know about their fake news, usual, but this is evidence of what we should be taking stock about and taking action.
It all seems a little convenient. Shaw has appeared on the conspiracy theory and comes to cover up about you.
Yes.
Yes. In a previous episode, we upped Jones' news and had the first Prime Minister of New Zealand, who are going to be fined because they broke spending his former things claims. Fake and investigation about the real government.
But until then, Josh, we're saving Syria.
And now, the theme.
And now, grunge article.
But we're not the environmental first. It, moving, should be so a unicorn.
Are we reviewing sex toys?
Yes, in the script.
Interesting. But of the aforementioned surefire intelligence, this week they will be trying to say about this, bad news.
Well, that's a usefully useless update. More lack of news as it.
Because everything is a lie.
Yes, why you read the important thing, and this is a left-wing activist. You see, the search for the missing Malaysia Airlines flight has resulted in thoughts of a bad lot of the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
And now, the theme.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, that
news.
was actually quite informative. I didn't actually know about a lot of that, but now I feel like I didn't know about a lot of that.
Well, that brings our 200th episode extravaganza to a close.
Are you going to want your vaginas back?
No, you can keep it. I've got vaganzas coming out my ears.
Extraordinary.
And, coincidentally, ears coming out my vaganzas.
You should see a doctor about that. I keep telling you
yes, well,
those aren't ears, those are warts.
Okay. So, obviously, there will be bonus content for the
There will
week as
indeed.
usual.
We'll be talking about the making of this 200th episode.
Maybe a bit of local news, maybe a bit of a retrospective, perhaps, on the previous.
Expect, patrons, a bumper episode this week, because it is episode 200. It's actually not episode 200 of the patron content.
No.
It's like episode 25. But
patron,
you know.
it's patron content for episode 200.
Indeed. And expect the expected.
Indeed. And of course, being episode 200, it's our last episode.
For this year.
For this year. We'll be back at some stage in January, probably. I'm sort of on holiday until around mid-January, but sometime after then, I imagine we'll strap on the equipment.
We will. We'll set up the lights. We'll dust the cobwebs off the auto cue.
Yep. And get back into it. But until then, I guess Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, I suppose. There'll be one of those before we see you again.
Or a sad New Year, depending on what happens.
Yes, you never know.
There will be a New Year.
Yep.
Unless the meteor hits beforehand, at which point there won't be anything. And this really will be the final episode of the podcast. It's Guide to Conspiracy. But you'll be dead.
Yep.
You'll still regret it, because in the afterlife and the hell that you're going to go to, you won't be able to listen to new content, whilst up in heaven we'll be broadcasting 24/7. But it will be the last time you hear the episodes.
Yep. So, worldwide cataclysms notwithstanding, see you all next year.
burn in hell. I mean, bye!
But also burn in hell.
You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Dr. MRX Dentith, which is written, researched, recorded and produced by Josh and M. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron via its Podbean or Patreon campaigns. And if you need to get in contact with either Josh or M, you can email them at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com or check their Twitter accounts, Monkey Fluids and Conspiracism. And remember, they're coming to get you, Barbara. And so we begin.
Merry Christmas, old Dean.
Why, thank you. Start that again.
Okay. Merry Christmas, old Dean.
No, don't. I'll say why thank you before I start doing the increases looking at box.
That would be ideal, yes.
Start as you mean to go on. Most of which is going to be me clapping.
Merry Christmas, old Bean.